Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our September 4th Rule Provisions Trig meeting. My name is Gerald Berumen. I work for the California Air Resources Board. I manage the On-Road Compliance and Reporting Assistance section, and I'll be giving a brief introduction today for today's meeting. I will be going over what we discussed at the last Trig meeting, and then I will turn it over to our co-chairs, Bradley Northup and Rebecca, to give their introductions, and then we will jump right into the agenda. We do have a full agenda today, so we want to make sure that we stay on time and on target. And so just a heads up on that one as well. So the the previous rule provisions meeting focused on the ZEV purchase exemption process, and we started the discussion on the daily usage exemption. CARB provided a handout prior to the meeting that gave an overview of the ZEV purchase exemption requests that we had received, and also included some of the common issues with the applications that we had seen. It also highlighted other issues related to the application process. And in order to help fleet owners with the ZEV purchase exemption process, we provided a draft ZEV purchase exemption checklist. And we provided that for review and comment. And to close that meeting, we provided a presentation covering the key points of the daily usage exemption, easy for me to say, which was given to facilitate the initial discussion and to lay the foundation for discussing it in more detail at today's meeting. So for today's meeting, we did post meeting materials a few weeks ago, and the notice of that went out at that time. So you could find all the meeting materials that will be discussed today posted online, and we will draw at the Advanced Clean Fleets website, the meetings and events page. We will drop a link to that page in the chat so that everyone can access that. But our agenda today we will be going after our introductions. We'll be starting our discussion on the daily usage exemption. Then we will also talk about a searchable list of ZEV manufacturers. We will cover ZEV purchase exemption checklist, manufacturer dealer upfitter survey, and then we'll have time for some open discussions, and we'll provide some statistics on some of the exemption, the received exemptions, as well as topics for the next meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bradley to give his introduction and to give us some of the ground rules for today's meeting. Bradley.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody. The fourth meeting in this series, and it's been hit or miss if you either get me or Rebecca or both of us. So just as a reminder, Rebecca and I are your co-chairs to this Trig Rules and Provisions Committee team. There are upwards of 26 of us on this panel, as well as additional CARB staff for presentations and answers throughout these meetings. The key elements here that we're trying to put forward with these meetings is making sure that this process of rule implementation goes smoothly, that we have the questions answered that we need to be able to make those decisions and that provide that information to the fleets out there with regard to the rule, working through some of the details and issues that might be coming up with regards to the rule and its provisions. And then the key elements are focusing on, key exemptions and extensions and that process exactly to the form here that we're talking about. Finally, we've got a lot of meat going on with documentation, and we've got resources here to discuss, and we hope that you took our combined outreach emails earlier last week and a couple weeks back when we had the agenda posted and the materials for our topics today. And if it is really important that all of us stay involved with this. So looking at the daily usage exemption checklists, hopefully you've reviewed that. You've written down any of the questions to bring up, the list of certified zero emission vehicles, as well as the purchase exemption checklist. Now, our key goal here is to get through all of this stuff in 2 hours today. It's going to be about 10 to 15 minutes per each presentation piece with CARB, leaving us at about 5 to 10 minutes each to be able to discuss and deliberate here. So let's make sure that we have constructive feedback here, that we have thoughtful comments, and if something is going to be off subject, we just make sure that that's something that we can follow up either on the back end with myself and Rebecca to we bring up to the next meeting, or if we have time, we're bringing it up closer to the end of the meeting. With that, let's send it off to Matt and talking about the daily usage exemptions.
Thanks, Bradley. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Kazjak. I'm an Air Resources Engineer at CARB, and today we'll be continuing our discussion on the daily usage exemption in CARB's ACF regulation by sharing 2 new documents. Let me share my screen here. Okay, the first document is the daily usage exemption checklist, which is currently available on CARB's website. This checklist is a tool designed to assist owners in submitting a complete application for the daily usage exemption. While this checklist is not required to submit an application, it does cover all the documentation required to be submitted. To apply for this exemption, your fleet must comply with all applicable requirements in the ACF regulation. And as mentioned previously, the California fleet must be comprised of at least 10% ZEVs or NZEVs to apply for this exemption.
Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it looks like your screen isn't sharing on our end.
Oh, I'm sorry. What happened here?
Make sure you're using the Zoom share screen.
Yeah, there we go. Let's see here. Okay.
Perfect.
So is that showing now? Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Here it is. So here it is on the website. To apply for this exemption, actually, as I said, 10%. You must have 10% ZEVs or NZEVs. And if your fleet cannot meet or can meet the upcoming compliance date without needing an exemption, there is no need to apply for an exemption. Also, there are some key requirements to keep in mind depending on your compliance pathway. If you're under the model year schedule, the application for this exemption must be submitted no later than 1 year prior to the compliance date for the vehicle. The application must also be submitted no earlier than when the vehicle being replaced reaches 16 years old or reaches 700,000 miles, whichever occurs first. For the ZEV purchase schedule, the application must not be earlier than when the replacement vehicle reaches at least 13 years old. If you have opted into the ZEV milestones option, the application for the exemption must not be submitted later than 1 year before the next ZEV milestone compliance date. And the application must demonstrate that the next ZEV fleet milestone cannot be reached without requesting and obtaining exemptions for all other vehicles in the California fleet. Next, we've included a checklist that includes all the required documentation to be submitted in the application. You'll need to include the vehicle's weight class, vehicle make, model, configuration, and a photo of the vehicle being replaced. If submitting multiple vehicles, it is recommended but not required to submit an Excel table that includes VIN or license plates. You'll also need to submit a daily usage report for a period of at least 30 consecutive workdays from within the last 12 months using telemetry or other data collection systems that tracks daily mileage or energy use. For energy use, submit diesel or gasoline gallons used or kilowatt hours for zero emission vehicles. If the fleet has a mutual aid agreement in place, they may choose to submit data from the last 30 for at least 30 consecutive workdays from the previous 60 months. If you are using energy use, make sure to submit energy used while operating integrated or truck-mounted equipment while stationary, and the number of hours the integrated or truck-mounted equipment is operated each day, if applicable. Next, you'll need to identify a comparable battery electric vehicle in the same weight class and configuration as the eligible ICE vehicle being replaced. Submit the vehicle weight class, vehicle make and model, configuration, the highest available rated energy capacity, and the calculated range or documented energy usage. Refer to sections 2015.3 B3 or sections 2013.1 B3 of the regulations for more information. Lastly, submit all the required documentation to truckers@arb.ca.gov. CARB will review and provide a response regarding the application within 45 days. Now I'd like to open up for questions, feedback on this checklist. Okay, Mike? I think you're on. Okay.
Yep, there we go. Sorry about that. So thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Hey, quick question. I see there was a 10% requirement on this exemption, I believe. Is that in there? I just didn't hear you mention it or see it.
Here, yes. Your California fleet must be comprised of 10% zero emission vehicles or ZEVs or NZEVs also here.
Okay, you got it. Thank you.
See here. Okay. Okay, anybody else? Okay, John.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no
Sorry
problem.
about that. So the part about if something's available from 2 or more folks, manufacturers, is there a distinction in CARB's world of a ZEP certified or non-ZEP certified for daily use exemption? If there's an available ZEV that's not ZEP certified versus one that is, does that matter?
You might be also talking about the ZEV purchase exemption. Is that right? There's 2 car manufacturers.
Yeah.
With here, if there is a ZEV available that matches your configuration and class, you need to submit the highest rated energy capacity, which would be in kilowatt hours for the battery. And then if we can calculate the range does not meet what your fleet needs, then you'd be eligible for that exemption. So there isn't really it really depends on your fleet needs and how your data comes out. Chris, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So the regulation doesn't specify in the daily usage exemption whether or not a vehicle configuration, a battery electric vehicle configuration that the fleet identifies needs to be zero emission powertrain certified. It's likely something we would apply, but Tony, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that.
I could say the way the concept was laid out is, the first thing that fleets would be looking at is whether they can even buy the vehicle in the configuration they need. And if the answer is yes, and then it came to the second part about, well, okay, it won't meet my daily needs per this method, then you would apply for that exemption. So since it's not as explicit, I think we'll just take it back and sort it out with our legal as to the best interpretation. But in principle, the concept is that there's presumably 1 or more vehicles available. It's then about the fitting the mileage or the daily operational need.
Yeah, thanks, Tony and Chris. I guess my question goes to the point of if there's something that's available but isn't ZEP certified, is CARB going to make me buy it? I guess.
I want to make sure we don't also talk past each other. There are certain class 4 and up incomplete vehicles, for example, those are ZEP requirements apply. But if you have a complete vehicle or below that in the 2B and 3 category, it isn't necessarily required to be considered available. So, but yeah, I think I'll just take back that nuance there just to make sure that I don't say X, Y, or Z, because I just want to make sure that nuance would cover it right.
Go ahead, Lacey. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So just to clarify, is there a scenario where a fleet, if there was a non-ZEP certed class 5, let's say, vehicle that was available, but there was no ZEP certed version of that vehicle available, would I be forced to buy the ZEP or the non-ZEP certed class 5 vehicle?
Let me say it this way. I don't believe so, but I'm going to go back and verify exactly if there's an interaction thing here that needs to be sorted out. Because again, under the purchase, if there was only one left under the purchase exemption itself, you would be able to be eligible to buy an ICE vehicle simply because it didn't meet the ZEP certification requirement if it was applicable, right? So, yeah. So let me just take it back to give you a firm answer. We'll just note that one.
Okay.
And try to clarify that, just to make sure, because I'm not looking at the details of the rule language at the moment, but we can look into it.
Yeah, so now a different question. The idea that if, I'll just use the example, if I have 100 trucks and I'm trying to get an exemption, a daily use for truck 57, and I give you the data, are you or CARB going to say no because truck 56 could get converted? I mean, and then do I have to go to truck 56 and say, here's my data on that? I mean, that's a question that I think is out there.
Yeah, no, I think Matt will get into it in a little more detail, because the daily usage exemption is based on looking at all trucks of the same basic configuration. So if you have 10 trucks that are effectively the utility trucks, let's just call them that, utility bucket trucks, if you have 10 of them, then the exemption is going to be based on the mileage for all 10, to then determine whether the exemption applies to the however many you're choosing to replace at the time. So Matt can walk through that, I think, and then
we'll go through the spreadsheet.
We'll revisit that question if it's still there.
Yeah, we'll go through the spreadsheet and I can answer any more questions after that.
Okay.
Any more questions on the checklist? Well,
Or comments. I mean,
Emily.
okay, so sorry. Yeah. So the question, sure, but any comments on, any information that you might think is helpful, or just comments on making it easier for a fleet owner to follow. Any feedback on that in that nature is also encouraged.
Go ahead, Emily.
Okay.
Yeah, and so kind of related to that, and this would probably go for both checklists. Could there be clarification for the public fleets that, if we're not just having to prove the exemption for one vehicle, but also showing that, no other vehicles could also be purchased? I mean, is that a factor here in daily usage like it is for the purchase exemption? Where we would need to do that.
So just to be clear, depending on the compliance path the public fleet selects, so there's either the ZEV purchase schedule or the ZEV milestones option. Under the milestones option, the regulation does specify for both the ZEV purchase exemption and the daily usage exemption that the fleet would need to submit exemption requests for all remaining combustion vehicles in the California fleet and show that they pretty much have no options other than getting an exemption to upgrade to meet their compliance requirements. And just to make sure we're not talking past each other, under either pathway for a daily usage exemption, the regulation does specify that as part of the daily checklist or the daily mileage report, and Matt, if you don't mind scrolling down to that portion, the daily mileage report has to be 30 consecutive work days within the last 12 months for all ICE vehicles of the same weight class and configuration of the one you're requesting the exemption for. So it's not every vehicle in the fleet, but it is every vehicle of the same weight class and configuration. So if you had 100 trucks in your fleet and 10, let's just say class 5 bucket trucks, we would need the data report for the daily usage exemption from all 10 class 5 bucket trucks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess as a follow-up then, I go through this process for my bucket truck and the data is good and you would approve it, except that we're also buying a pickup truck and you think I could replace that one instead. Like, what am I having to submit for all the other purchases to prove that I need the exemption, assuming I can qualify for the exemption?
Okay, so Tony, I think that gets into the question about how do we determine if a fleet needs an
Right,
exemption to qualify?
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. I mean, the whole spirit of the rule is if you're, let's just use the example, you're buying 2 trucks. One's a bucket truck, and let's just say it's, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, bucket truck, and you're buying a pickup, and the pickup you can buy as 0 emission. If you can buy it as 0 emission and you buy it, you meet your 50%, no reason for an extension. We would just return and say, hey, you're complying, everything's good. It doesn't matter the reason for the exemption in that particular case, because an exemption is simply not necessary.
Yeah, I might just
So-
recommend that it's somewhere in this checklist that you're expected to kind of provide that information with your exemption, just so that people aren't surprised when you come back and ask for it. That's just a recommendation for both of the exemptions.
You're looking at I'm sorry, the issue like us to address is if it's a, lack of a better term, a situation where some vehicles might not be available at all to purchase, and then a situation where some wouldn't meet the mileage criteria, and how to deal with that combination. Is that kind of the?
Yeah, any stacking of exemptions, just whatever information we have to show about all of our purchases to prove that we need an exemption is, I guess, part of the checklist, because it needs to be part of the package.
So in other words, you're suggesting to add that public fleets would need to submit information about all of their purchases made during a calendar year and not just the ones that they're applying for exemptions for as part of the package. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
If that is what CARB is currently requiring, I think that you should be upfront about that requirement. It might be obvious to you, but it might not be obvious to us.
Okay.
That's
Well,
my
thank you.
recommendation. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more comment on this, and then we have to
Sarah?
move on. So go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just gonna build on that. And maybe it's worth putting, even if it's an example of, you have this scenario and that folks, if they're not meeting it or requesting exemption, but then they need to look at the remaining of their fleet in that class, that be an opportunity to put a case study or some example together for clarity. I'm just thinking about all the different staff hours that are going to be put into trying to figure this out when folks are putting their applications together, and it could be significant. But it's unclear here, and I think with a lot of the folks in the way they're planning, at least from a wastewater sector public agency perspective, they're really looking to get as much useful life out of their existing ICE vehicles as much as possible, and to have to replace one that they weren't expecting just to meet the rule when they really need to replace this other vehicle, I would imagine there'd be a lot of confusion around that approach.
Okay. And then and so I know that was kind of the last question, but there's on the topic, I mean, on the screen, the second paragraph, if your fleet can comply with the next compliance date specified in the regulation without an exemption that you don't need to apply, was the highlight on that issue. But we'll look at how to elaborate on that to make it more obvious for people.
Yeah, and it may be something that, there is an example out there that we could help, or if there's one of these representatives on the panel that has somebody that's going through it. Anyway, just a thought. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Matt, let's move on to the next topic.
Sure.
Or next part of the same topic.
Right.
The second item I'd like to share is a draft version of the daily usage exemption report template. This spreadsheet is a voluntary compliance assistance tool designed to assist fleets in evaluating eligibility for a daily usage exemption. So the first sheet kind of walks you through the worksheet, the inputs and outputs. The input cells are here in orange. Calculation cells show up as gray with the red text here. We'll walk through each item here. And this is where you're going to enter the data here. So this is daily usage data sheet is where you would actually put your data in. You start here, you put the first workday in here. And if you change it, it'll change the rest of these here. These are all calculation cells here too. You select your weight class for a vehicle, either 2B, 4 through 6. And so this will change the calculations down here. You input your configuration. This is where you'll put each vehicle in here. You'll either use a VIN, it's not required, or license plate. Then you put your daily mileage for each cell here by the date. And then it'll calculate here for you the lowest mileage from each day. And it'll automatically exclude the top 3 readings across here. Then you have to put in the make, model, configuration, and class, and highest rated energy capacity here in kilowatt hours for the BEV that you've identified. And it'll calculate here for you the estimated range based on the regulations. To assist, I've put a sheet here with just some sample data here. So let's say we've got, starting on August 7th, we have a class, this is a class 4 box truck. And it has the data here. The weekends are blank because they didn't drive the trucks. These don't count as work days here. If it's blank, it'll show up as not applicable here. This records the lowest mileage reading for each day. And this, after excluding the top 3 highest readings, you get 107 miles here. We found a Mitsubishi box truck that has 124.2 kilowatt hours. With the regs, there's a factor there, which is automatically generated for you is 1.3, which you get theoretical range on that BEV is 96 miles. So here you can see the fleet's requirements are above what the theoretical range is of the BEV here. So the fleet would be eligible for at least one exemption here based on the data. And what you can do is you can submit all the data to us like this, and we'll figure it out for you too. But this is kind of a tool to see if you would qualify or not for anything. If this value is higher than this, then I would recommend submit an application. If you adhere to all the other requirements, I would recommend submitting an application to us with the data we request. So this will be for each class and configuration. You want to have one sheet. So you want to submit all the vehicles of the same weight class and configuration on this sheet, so compare them all. If you have more than one you want to submit for, you can copy these sheets over and just make one for each type of truck you have. If you have more than 10 trucks here, just insert rows here. So that's pretty much how I have here. Do you have any questions for me right now that I can help out with? And this is a rough draft form. We're going to make changes to this, so we're hoping to get some feedback from you.
Yeah, and John,
Sure.
okay, as I say, John, this could follow up on that question you asked earlier and see if this made it easier to understand that.
Yeah, so thanks. The question I had was, it was stated that you'd be eligible for at least one. How do you know? What if you need 6? How do you know if you're eligible for 1, 2, 3?
You can submit to us and we can do it for you. We can also figure it out for you. But the way I would do it is I would find the vehicle here that qualifies for it. You go through here, figure out which vehicle it is that's qualifying for it, and you would eliminate that truck. You run it again. And if your data still shows that your highest 4th remaining daily mileage is higher than this, you get another truck. So you keep eliminating each truck until you don't have any more trucks that qualify for a daily usage exemption.
And is that that does make sense? Is that in the instructions anywhere?
Yes. Well, let's see here. I might have put in here. I can't remember if I took it out or not. I kind of looked up to.
We'll take that comment and make sure
Yeah,
that
we'll put it on there.
process is described, whether it be here or in one of the FAQs or adding the example kind of thing.
Yeah, I might
Okay.
put it on there.
All of these are preliminary drafts. It's like, yeah, if you guys don't like this idea, we can take a different approach. And if certain things we can elaborate on, whether it be on an FAQ or inside the spreadsheet, we can see what we think maybe the best mechanism is to do that.
Okay.
Any more questions or comments? Mike.
Yeah, thanks. Just so that you mentioned this theoretical range, and you guys will probably collect more data on range as this process comes forward. Will that be incorporated into the spreadsheet, or will it always be the regulatory language and then up
Well, my
to?
understanding is that you can use this reg language here. You can use this value. Otherwise, if you if you need to prove otherwise, you can use a different value. But I think this is pretty conservative, these values here, and then the regs. And so I wouldn't really think, unless Chris has something to add, you can use that value. That's not really a change.
I'll add, I mean, so the regulation has the table that is the default value, and it's based on the weight class bin. So we know it's not perfect, and you know, we do think it actually errs on the low side, being conservative or whatever the right term is. If you want to use something else, the regulation does specify that you can use actual data from an actual truck, a ZEV, for example, whether it's in your fleet, or presumably in your fleet, but you can use data from other fleet that collected information on the same type of vehicle and the same type of operation instead of that particular number. So that you could use real data, or we're going to rely, or otherwise the factor is going to be used.
So if I'm using real data, what do I need to provide you guys? Just, you know, what type of documentation?
That's all specified in the regulation. We don't have it laid out here because it is a bit more documentation required. But generally it's measured BEV energy usage data, and it has to include vehicle loading and weight data, route grade, average ambient daily temperature, a number of other things. You can find all of those details on page A232 of the high priority fleets regulation.
Got it, Chris. Thank you. I'm looking right at it.
Sure.
Right, David?
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I'm missing something, but just a hypothetical. If since the data is obviously in the past 30 days of trucks, and you have a new business inquiry or opportunity that may have pushed, you know, purchasing a new truck to be exempt, but the data shows it's not exempt, how's that handled? That makes sense.
It was a little confusing for me. So you're saying a brand new business that comes in as a $50 million company plus, I mean, subject to the rule, as opposed to
no. So let's say as a trucking company, we have customers and there's a new lane opportunity.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So you're already subject to the requirements, but you're going to expand your fleet.
Correct, because a new business, and you know, let's say you're not exempt per the prior 30 days data, but the new business obviously hasn't happened yet, and that new business would potentially push you over the threshold to where you now are exempt. How do you justify that?
So by my reading, it would have to be based on a vehicle that's being replaced in the fleet, one, and two, because the regulation does specify that it has to be 30 consecutive work days from within the past 12 months. Then on my reading, the regulation wouldn't be able to look at future potential business for a daily usage exemption specifically.
Yeah, has to be based on history.
Yeah, so you could potentially start that business, collect that data for that 30-day period, and then submit an exemption request on that basis. But you would have to collect that data first and then submit it.
So we'd have to, in theory, purchase a ZEV, prove that we don't need a ZEV, and then purchase an ICE and have an extra ZEV.
Well, if you don't have 30 days of data, I don't see how you apply, period. And again, don't forget, I mean, this is, I think, the common thing that I feel like happens a lot. It's like the rule does have a bit of flexibility in it, how you comply. You can strategically place the ZEVs in your fleet where it makes the most sense, and then continue to operate your other vehicles that however you normally operate them. And then you'll have data on those vehicles, and the next year, the year after, you might come in and say, okay, I've already did the ZEVs where it was easy or easier or applicable. I'm getting to the parts that are more challenging, whether it's mileage or presumably based on mileage. Then at that point, you would have data to apply.
Yeah, and based on what Tony said, but just to piggyback off of that, it wouldn't require you to purchase a ZEV necessarily. It would require you to collect data on your combustion vehicles operating on that new business route in order to be able to substantiate that, yeah, based on this 30 days of data, that none of my trucks could be replaced by an available ZEV. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to purchase a ZEV to gather that data. To me, the regulation just says you would have to collect that data on existing ICE vehicles.
That's why it's so challenging with the theoreticals, because right now I took your theoretical as you're not buying any new trucks, you're just going to run some more.
Well, no, so
further.
if you
and then
were
I
to
want to
buy,
make sure too, my correction, it's not about the new trucks on the route, it's about all the trucks that are the same that you own in your business. So if you have 100 trucks and you're going to expand a business by operating them in a double shift operation or something, for half your trucks, the other half could potentially be electrified to meet the requirement without needing an exemption. So it's not about that specific lane or anything. It's about the total operation of your fleet of all the vehicles of the same type when we're talking about mileage or the usage exemption.
If I had, say, 100 trucks and I'm 10% and I'm compliant, but I need 105 trucks to do, satisfy the new business.
Okay, so you're adding more trucks.
Yeah.
Okay, but then under the under the mile, well, okay, but see, this is where we're getting to a lot of theoretical. So under the model year schedule, by definition, anything you're adding has to be zero emission. Otherwise, you're not using that option. And anything that you're looking to get an exemption for is something that's required to be replaced. So it's basically at its 18 years or 800,000 miles. And I'm going to right now say if your theoretical doesn't go there, then you wouldn't be eligible to even apply.
So in those cases, if the new business it's not feasible to complete the business with a ZEV, we just can't handle the business.
Or you could adjust your operations to move the trucks that can complete the business, such as your existing ICE vehicles, to that route and place the ZEVs in operation where they could fit in your existing business.
Yeah, and then again, we're doing model year schedule discussion, but at that point, whether you're in a similar situation as a state and local government, everybody can consider the milestone option and see if that's a better fit. Because that one allows you to add and remove combustion vehicles as long as you meet the percentages. And those percentages are staggered in over time, but based on truck type. So if we're talking semis, 2027 is your first date. And if you're talking sleeper cabs, then that's 2030, or specialized ones would be 2030 is your first date. So you might find that a better option to fit your operational needs and to easily expand without having to worry about even requesting an exemption potentially.
And just to be super clear, both the ZEV purchase exemption and daily usage exemption in all cases and all compliance pathways do require that you are replacing an existing vehicle of the same configuration in the fleet. So none of these exemptions would be able to be used to just purchase new vehicles.
All right, I'm gonna time check everybody here, and we'll keep moving it on. I know Brent, you had your hand up. Hopefully, we can get to that to your comment. I just want to keep everything moving along and remind everybody there's a lot of hypotheticals here. We won't be able to answer all the hypotheticals when we talk about this and we go through these items. So please keep into direct feedback. What is good? What you'd like to see changed? What are some things that are useful? This type of a tool is something that we need to be able to provide the feedback for so that it becomes more useful once it goes prime time, right? It's our opportunity to be able to make the changes now. So keep those in mind with the situational pieces and where a tool or the checklist isn't as clear as it could be in those scenarios. Okay, I think we're going to move it on to the next subject item with Haley.
Hi everyone, my name is Haley McGlasson and I am with CARB as a air pollution specialist. Today I am going to go over the new list of certified ZEV manufacturers visual that was published on our ACF page. So just real quick on how to navigate to this visual. If you're on the ACF page, let me screen share real quick. Okay. Perfect. All right, so if we are on this page here, we're going to go ahead and scroll down to FAQs. Under FAQs, the list of certified zero emission vehicles will be here. The Power BI visual is a little bit slower, so just give it a sec to come up. This visual is going to be a table of manufacturers with medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles certified for sale in the state of California as of June 5th, 2024. So kind of how to navigate this tool. We have the main table here by weight class, manufacturer, and the ZEV model. You're able to filter this visual by weight class. So you can select in the drop-down menu here, different weight classes. So for instance, if I selected the class 2B and 3, it will filter this list here by just the 2B and 3. And there's these two cards here that will display based on the weight classes that you've selected. So for 2B and 3, there's currently 65 ZEV models available from 6 different manufacturers. You can also select multiple classes, so class 2B and 3 and 4 and 5 if you wanted to, and the cards will sum the number of models and manufacturers that you have selected. And then those will all be listed here. If you want to sort by manufacturer as well, you can click the heading, and the heading will sort by alphabetical, or if you want to do by weight class, it'll sort that way as well. So that is that visualization. So this is just a tool that we created just to help fleets basically be able to quickly identify manufacturers that are certified for sale. And we're updating this list as new EOs come in as well. So it'll just kind of ever be evolving. All right, do we have any questions on this visualization?
I see Brett's still got his hand up from the last round. Brett, do you have a comment on this particular item?
Yes,
Great.
I do.
Go ahead.
I guess where is this list garnered from? What data source?
This is a list that was built off of the EOs, so all of the executive orders that have been submitted.
Who would an OEM reach out to see this edited or adjusted for increased accuracy?
So it's being updated currently. So I know there are a couple gaps that have been identified that we're working on updating right now.
I'm sorry, this is Tony. I just want to jump in. Sure. I mean, if there's any comments, concerns, I mean, you can direct them to ZepFleet or one of the staff if there's an issue. But we essentially took the approach of copying it verbatim from the executive order. And so to us, it's like, okay, some of these seem a little less intuitive, but that's exactly the way they're listed on the executive order. So, but we can discuss whether we should take a different approach.
So just the ZEV's generic inbox would be a good place to start.
The ZepFleet email, I think, would be a perfect place to start. If there's any issues or problems, then you can just try to reach to one of us directly. But the ZepFleet is how we kind of distribute the requests and get back to people.
And if you want to,
is there a general comment? I mean, that is useful for the group, or we could just take it offline?
Oh, Tony, I figured there's going to be customers, fleets, and OEMs all navigating the same tool. So I think just being able to quickly identify manufacturers and ZEV models, if this is a source of truth. So I think it is beneficial for the group to know how to, what the data source is. So if we either need to change something upstream so that it's clean for my customers to see or other fleets to see, or if there's a feedback loop we can initiate so to make sure it's valuable.
Yeah, no, and we definitely invite additional comments. This was, again, that's how we pulled it. If there's lack of a better term, I can't think of the right term. If there's well, for example, one of the things that we do notice is that we're the manufacturer has subsidiaries and so on, and so whether the manufacturer is obvious as opposed to the parent company. I'm sorry, the manufacturer as understood by the customer versus the parent company. Things like that might not always align. And so if you have comments on that, we appreciate that too, actually, to make sure that it is, the whole point of this is to make this useful, not to, and if we can make it more intuitive, then that'd be great for your customers and others.
A follow-up question just for back to Brett. Is that pretty reasonable for CARB to be able to rely on OEMs providing the clarification on the manufacturer, the description, the model, as it should be, outside of the EO? If there's a better description, for example, on your screen you see Carson Automotive, Sanye, and Takaret as a manufacturer. That's not one most of us are any familiar with. If that is something that can be easily expected to have information provided to CARB to clarify what that manufacturer's, doing business as, or, the entity with the manufacturing marketing, that makes it more intuitive that CARB can then use, that's easy enough for manufacturers to send to CARB to be able to update and provide revisions. And one additional item, whether or not OEMs would be able to provide hyperlinks or web addresses to those types of locations where something may be able to be referenced in a sheet like this to just have a click through for a manufacturer.
Yeah, absolutely, Bradley. I think there is opportunities here. And Tony, to your point, I mean, I work with EOs, and looking at it makes my head spin. And so the terminology often used on the EO is not ubiquitous to what the market space experience is, just as you alluded to as well. We're listed as Daimler. Daimler doesn't build the Cascadia or the EM2 Freightliner brand. So, just working through those nuances, just wanted to understand where it's being pulled from. So if there's an adjustment we need to make on how we file our EOs, or if there's a quality loop to see it updated.
If it helps, I appreciate the feedback too, because at least in my head, I was initially thinking, oh, we can add more columns to maybe have the more intuitive ones be up front, but still match the EOs as an example. So if you could comment on that as well. Again, the whole point of this is just to make it easier for the buyer to know what's out there, and what's actually certified, and so on. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if this is buyer centric, then EOs may not be the appropriate path.
I can't tell who had their hand up first after Brett. I believe it was Lacey. And then we go to Sarah.
Thank you. So on this list, I see that there are several OEMs that do not have ZEP certs. And I think if a fleet is not required to buy a ZEV if it's not ZEP certed, I think it's confusing to have them on this list. Was that intentional? Was that thought through?
Yeah, I mean, I think our intent with this list is to provide a resource for anybody who wants to comply with the regulation. So because the regulation does not necessarily say that a vehicle must be ZEP certified to count towards compliance, fleets could purchase a zero emission vehicle off of this list, and that vehicle would count towards their compliance. Now, if they're in a situation like a ZEV, where they're saying if ZEV's not available for purchase, this list would not be a list of all the zero emission powertrain certified vehicles. The goal here is to provide kind of a resource for fleets to go to find out who is making ZEVs that would comply with the regulation, not necessarily the ones that they would be forced to buy if they were applying for an exemption.
Okay, but if there were no ZEP certed vehicles in the category that they need in their category of operations, wouldn't they not have any, like they would be exempt from any requirements, right?
I don't think I'm tracking your question correct.
Yeah, no. I mean, she's just identifying, again, I'll use an example to keep it simpler. I'm buying one truck and only one truck, and it has to be a ZEV, and there isn't one, and it's in the category where they would have to be ZEP certified to be considered available. And then in that case, would they qualify for the exemption? The answer would be yes.
Yeah.
And so this list isn't that purpose, and we try to be as very explicit on the description of there. This is a list of everything that is certified for sale. Isn't necessarily what you're describing, and I think that kind of leads into the kind of the next meeting topic potentially is what vehicles are going to be identified as available, not available. And so that's a slightly different question. So those aren't inconsistent, but right now, yeah, this is not the list of everything that wasn't ZEP certified that needed to be ZEP certified. And again, for everybody's benefit, in case you're not too familiar, I mean, the manufacturers will get credit for selling their ZEVs if they are certified, if they're in the right category, and they won't get any credit for selling them if they aren't certified to the ZEP cert requirements. So the likelihood of them not certifying is going to be awfully low, but it's theoretically possible, but low. But that's a different purpose, and we can
so I
figure
guess
out how to handle that.
Tony, at minimum, I would strongly recommend that this list be for everything class 4 and up, that the grouping be separated at least to 2 different tables. If there are vehicles that are not ZEP certed, that be in a below table, because if I'm a fleet, I just think it's super confusing. They don't understand, certification language, and there are definite advantages for a fleet to be purchasing a ZEP certed vehicle versus a non-ZEP certed vehicle. That's the whole purpose of ZEP cert. So, you know, making it clear so that they don't end up in a non-ZEP certed vehicle, I think that would behoove everyone.
Okay.
I think we have time for one more on this one, so go ahead, Sarah. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yep, sorry about that. So building on points that others have made, which I agree in terms of developing more clarity for if this is buyer centric, a lot of folks on the public agency side, like the wastewater side, look at those maybe incomplete vehicles and building on those and adding to those for the kind of operations that they will need as far as where they go in the field, what their need for power takeoff and other. And so this ZEV model, some, maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like some have that note of complete versus incomplete. And for the sake of quickness and looking at this and this whole process that they have so far, it would be great if that just could be checked to make sure that all of them are. And maybe you have a column in your larger, broader database of Power BI that already has that, because I know that that's the beauty of Power BI, right? To be able to manage a lot of data. If that could just be added to one of these columns, or that column being added to this, I guess, interface would be great.
Sarah, you have an example of a column information that you'd like to see?
Well, the complete versus incomplete vehicle that we talked about, they're all certified, right? But there's some complete, some incomplete vehicles, and some of them have labels of complete or incomplete in this ZEV model column. I wonder if that could just be a separate column at this interface. And like, again, if this is buyer centric and folks that are coming to see, oh, I'm trying to replace my vehicle. I want a quick look at this list because I have all this data I need to collect. It would be nice if that was very explicit.
And I'll add to that as well a thought on body type in relation to milestone requirements. If there was a definition to match these vehicles, at least the complete vehicles, to the body type that could be called out. One item that I saw, just to chime in before we move on to the next topic, looks like we have some makes and models on there that aren't actually Class 2B. So the weight itself, it may be an electric vehicle, but it is not a Class 2B vehicle. And there looks like different model trims that were called out. This is just a quick example, the Ford Lightning Platinum versus the Pro, and the Lightning four-wheel drive non-extended range versus the extended range. The extended range is over 8,500 pounds. The standard range is not over 8,500 pounds. So that's just some clarity there. We're taking a vet into what the stated gross vehicle weight rating or expected gross vehicle weight rating by test is, so that we can understand, the classification range that we're dealing with. Is it a Class 3 on the low end? Is it a Class 3 on the high end? What's the offerings there? It just helps, and especially if it's already being submitted with the EO. For the weight, the range, and all of those things, then it helps us determine where vehicles are in their capacities.
Okay.
Do we have time for one? Do we have time for one more before we move on to the next one? Or
certainly.
Okay, John.
So what I don't see on this page is why I would go to this page, right? It just says here's a list of the vehicles and manufacturers available. I think it'd be helpful if there was. If you're looking for an exemption, go here. If you're looking for just purchase, go here. If you're looking for, right? I mean, why am I here? And because this is Lacey's discussion and others, why did I go here? And you don't have to, I'll be quick. I just think there should be something here that says this list is useful for the people looking to buy ZEVs, looking for an exemption, looking to meet two manufacturers to reach out to two manufacturers. I mean, why am I on this list? I think would be helpful.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay, appreciate that comment. I can say that at least from a couple other places we point them over here, but I hear your comment. We can look at adding that to this too.
And perhaps it helps with clarification. This is not the list of exempt vehicles. This is a resource for those looking to purchase and also educating themselves with what vehicles would be available and offered that are on the radar if you hadn't already had those on your radar. So resources to know what is and is not available are both sourced.
Yeah, and who makes them and who's not potentially.
Right.
Okay. We should probably move on.
Yeah, let's go.
All
on to the
right.
next.
Okay,
Next item, Haley.
perfect. Let me share my next screen here. Hmm. Okay. Let's see. There we go. Whoa. Okay. So the next document that we are sharing here is kind of a recap of the Advanced Clean Fleet ZEV Purchase Exemption Checklist. The purpose of this document is intended to assist fleet owners in ensuring that they submit complete applications for the ZEV purchase exemption. Navigating this document, it begins with the application basics. This section here discusses the key eligibility requirements for each of the 3 compliance methods: model year schedule, ZEV purchase schedule, and the ZEV milestones option. Under this section, each of the compliance methods are a direct link to the applicable fact sheets on our website, and under each compliant method bullet point is a list of the key eligibility requirements as outlined in the regulation. Below that is the application submission checklist. This is an optional tool created to help fleets ensure they have included all of the information required per the regulation in their ZEV purchase exemption application. This checklist includes the vehicle make and model, the vehicle weight class, configuration, if the vehicle has a crew cab or cab over, and if the vehicle is all-wheel drive, and then if applicable, the make and model of the body and a list of any frame attachments other than the body itself necessary to support or perform the primary intended function of the vehicle. Next is clear and legible photographs of the entire left and right sides of the vehicle, showing the body configuration, and also documentation from 2 or more manufacturers that offer ZEV or NZEV chassis or complete vehicles. That state manufacturers does not offer for sale a ZEV or NZEV chassis or complete vehicle of the vehicle to be replaced. And then the next section here, under the submit your application section, this explains where to submit the application, the link to the truckers@arb.ca.gov email. And it also notes the 45-day application deadline CARB has for responding to applications, and explains how CARB staff will research manufacturer, dealer, and upfitters to identify any that offer a ZEV or NZEV in the needed configuration in the same or next higher weight class within the parameters described in the regulation. Any questions? Comments?
No questions, Haley.
Cool.
Right.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's move on to Pranesh.
Hey everyone, my name is Pranesh Maninder. I'm an air resources technician here at CARB, and I'm going to share a draft of a survey that we're thinking of sending out to manufacturers, dealers, and upfitters to see if we can get a availability of the different classes and configuration of medium and heavy duty trucks. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. All right. So on this workbook, there are 3 tabs. One of them is the README tab, one of them is a survey, and one of them is example. The README tab has instructions on the purpose of the survey and where to return the survey and how. So for the actual survey itself, it starts out with asking for the contact information for whoever is filling it out. Hopefully this can be like a point of contact that CARB can use when we need to verify something to make sure that it exists, or if a manufacturer or an upfitter can actually make it exist. And then so it has what weight class can your company sell or upfit. So basically, if you put on this like that your company can sell class 2, 3, and 4, then if we get like, if we need verification on a vehicle existing in class 2 or 3 or 4, we put you on one of the emails and make sure that we're reaching out to you. So for the survey itself, it says vehicles available to purchase, and then we have 10 rows of vehicles that you can enter. If you need more than that, you can just copy and paste the last row until you have enough vehicles or like columns that you'd need to fill out the survey properly. And since this survey is voluntary, there's nothing saying that you have to complete it. You can complete as much of it as you want, or if, like all of it, how much ever you want to do. It asks for the weight class, and then the powertrain. Is it combustion, battery electric vehicle, FCEV, or hybrid? And then you can use the drop-down menu to select. And then if it is combustion vehicle that you're selling in the make and model, we ask, is this available to purchase in a ZEV powertrain from you? Just so like we have information for the future. And then we have some energy capacity questions. Those are if they are battery electric vehicles or hybrids. We just want to know like if you're already going to be filling out the survey and have battery electric vehicles or hybrids available. We want to make sure that we're not just bothering you constantly. So if you already have the data available, if you could just enter that in onto these squares or cells. And then for the FCEV, if you have a hydrogen like storage capacity already available, we'd like that in kilograms just to make it uniform for all manufacturer like numbers. Then we ask for a total number of axles that this vehicle makes and model can have. We ask if they are complete vehicles or cab and chassis, if they're available with all-wheel drive, if they're available as cab over, and if they're available as a crew cab. And these are just like things to help with the ACF regulations to make sure if we ever do get like a fleet telling us, hey, I was trying to buy this ICE vehicle in this configuration with all of these things on it, and I was having trouble finding it. It was just like be an easier way for us to verify if we have the data already. Then we move on to the configurations. So there are about 28 different configurations on this list right here. If you make the configuration, or if that vehicle make and model can have that configuration upfitted onto it by an upfitter, you can mark it with yes. And if you don't, or if the vehicle cannot be upfitted by an upfitter, you can just mark it as no or leave it alone. Then there's another comments section in case like we forgot something that you wanted to share with us, comments or concerns or questions. And then here's an example of like an upfitter that filled out the survey. So these are just like not legitimate businesses. So if they look like legitimate businesses or vehicles, they're purely coincidental. So this is a generic body upfitter that like can upfit vehicles. So, and the weight class that they can sell or upfit is 7 and 8. So, and then this is how they filled out like their vehicles that they can upfit. So they have a vehicle make and model called a UES Isuzu NQR, which is a class 7 combustion vehicle. And then since it's combustion, they answered that, is this available to purchase in a ZEV powertrain from you? As yes. And then basically just how to fill it out. Complete vehicle, no, 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 no. and then like the types of configurations that they can upfit onto the vehicle. And since this is an upfitter, like we expect all of the vehicles that they are finished upfitting to be complete vehicles and road ready after. So the next column is basically the same thing. It's for a bus that's class 7 combustion, available to purchase as a ZEV powertrain from them. And then let's move on to one where there's like a battery electric vehicle. So the Packer Kenworth K270E class 7 battery electric vehicle. Since this isn't combustion, you don't have to even answer this question. You can just skip to the next question for what is it? Rated energy capacity in kilowatt hours. So there are certain models where if you put an extended battery pack, you'll have different rated energy capacity. So if you have like the smaller battery pack, you get 141. And then if you have the bigger one, you have 282. You can just separate those out by using a comma. And then like just go to the configurations and put in what they can be upfitted with. Any questions?
Go ahead, Emily.
Sorry, clarify question. What is this survey being used for? Like, where will this information go, or how is it going to be used for the regulation?
So generally, the purpose of this survey is to help us identify manufacturers and upfitters that are making vehicles in any given weight class or configuration. So if we get an application in for a purchase exemption for, let's say, a class 5 bucket truck, then theoretically the survey will help us identify manufacturers of class 5 bucket trucks that we can then reach out to confirm whether or not they offer them as ZEVs. So really
Okay,
what
so
we're trying to
like-
do here is just gather who is making what in what configurations and in what weight classes, and help us establish some contacts.
So it wouldn't just be you just pass this information along to fleets looking to purchase. You might like reach out and confirm it's still up to date and accurate first.
Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah, that is the purpose. And we would also be looking to use this to help build out our contact list. So when we do have to reach out to manufacturers, that we can identify a smaller list, a targeted list to reach out to, rather than just sending an email blast out to every possible person about, hey, we have an exemption application and we'd like to know if anybody can do something. This will help us kind of narrow that and target those communications.
All right, thank you.
Then Mike.
Yeah, thank you. And Bradley, you mentioned this earlier, and I thought we were headed in this direction, but I think we've gone past it. The ZEV purchase exemption list. I was wondering how that is being developed, where we're at on that, and it sounds like this is unrelated to that, or maybe supplemental to it. Are we going to discuss that today as part of this, or is that?
Not today. We'll be looking to tee that up as a potential conversation for next trig meeting.
Yep. And we're working really hard to make sure that can be within time for all of us to discuss and review, to be able to have a conversation prior to the start of that list being published. And to Mike, your call out there, this is an accessory, right? This is a tool for CARB to be able to use and ZEV manufacturers to be able to provide the really important information about what is being offered out there, so that everybody's aware of what is available, not available. Let's see, Sarah had her hand up next.
Yeah, I guess I also wonder if, or it should be included, which have had actual road tests done as well, because to know what they're trying to manufacture and what the intention is great and great information, but that road test information is pretty important relative to essential public services.
And you'd be looking for that information from both combustion and zero emission vehicles?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's generally what we need before there's purchases, is that the road test is achieved and successful, whether it's ICE ZEV any.
And I'll add to that, to Sarah's comment, if it was on the road or if there's a demonstration model available, those are two in particular things we need to make sure that the vehicles actually exist and not just on paper. Upfittable is not necessarily available. All right, John.
I'm gonna let Rick go first. I think that'd be more
Okay.
appropriate. Yeah.
Rick? Thank you, John.
Yeah, one question I have is, would there be information back and forth regarding what type of power or energy requirements there are from that user group to determine if an upfit is actually possible or not, as far as from CARB or from the person who submitted the exemption, because that will really determine whether an upfit is actually possible on a configuration of a vehicle or not.
Do you mean in regards to like the calculated range based off of the completed chassis upfit?
In our applications, a lot of this is not necessarily related to range. It's more related to what type of exportable power is available to run equipment when it's on site.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, John.
So first, I have a couple of questions or comments. The first one is, if this is voluntary, right? Just to confirm, this is not mandatory. When, let's say someone filled it out and a week, month, half a year later, they get an email from CARB saying, do you make this? Is there a requirement at that point for them to respond?
No,
That's the first question.
nothing in the regulation requires manufacturers to respond, and that's part of what factors into our 45-day time frame. So again, this survey is kind of to help us develop our contact lists so that we understand who to reach out to when for purposes of a ZEV purchase exemption application, per the reg. If CARB's executive officer can't identify any zero emission vehicles, then we have the option to go ahead and post that on the CARB website, solicit feedback from manufacturers, upfitters, and dealers to see whether or not anybody could make that vehicle in a zero emission configuration. And part of the purpose of this survey is to help us identify who to reach out to when we do post something online. So if we know that there's, only 5 manufacturers that are making bucket trucks, then we would want to target our outreach to those manufacturers.
Okay. I guess my concern with this survey is there's a lot of upfitters out there, and they do a lot of different things, and they do a lot of custom ideas, right? I mean, the work truck is sort of designed backwards from what you need it to be done. So a bucket truck could have X, Y, and Z on it as well, or a dump truck could be in certain configurations, or could have a side gate, or could have a dump truck with a snow plow, right? There's so many different configurations that this survey seems like it won't be as useful as you may want it to be, right? There's so many permutations, I guess, is my point. And if Rick or others were to fill this out for everything that they could possibly do, that's going to be a pretty big data set.
I will just chime in real quick, John. The survey appears, at least from our first glance, to be limiting to factors associated with regulatory requirements and specifics to a unique body configuration outside of a definition wouldn't necessarily be considered as available, not available. So keeping in mindset with this is a tool to help CARB stay educated from the manufacturers of what is available based off of the regulatory requirements.
Right. So we would be looking at, hopefully this would help us identify who's making dump trucks at all out there, regardless if they come with snowplows or not. And so theoretically, we would get some responses from manufacturers and upfitters that say, yeah, we upfit dump trucks, or we manufacture chassis that can be upfit as dump trucks. And then we would have now a list of manufacturers and upfitters to reach out to. If somebody had come to us and said, no, I need the dump truck with a plow and a lift gate, we can reach out to that set of dump truck manufacturers to say, can anybody make the vehicle within the parameters of the regulation.
And is this a dynamic survey or is it a one and done?
I think right now one and done to help us build out our initial contact list, but we would probably be looking to update that over time. So Tony, looks like
Yeah,
you-
I'll pop in. Yeah, I mean, this is again, that's something we're exploring. And so initially it's going to be a resource like Chris had described. But then I do anticipate that over time, if a manufacturer is like, hey, or an upfitter is like, you guys don't have me on your list, I want to be reached when somebody says they can't get a ZEV, put me on your list, then we're thinking that this survey would be effectively the same basic information they'd provide, and probably the same way if we do it online kind of thing. It's like, because you know, we obviously want to get people who are experts in the area, and we're not going to try to collect or send information requests to people who aren't actual upfitters. And as Chris kind of mentioned, to the extent that they identify their area of specialization or the truck configuration they typically work on, then we can also be more, we can direct any requests to the actual upfitters that do those kinds of vehicles rather than to the entire list that we would have, for example, that wouldn't be relevant for somebody who makes tractors when they're talking about a class 4 truck of some kind.
Looks like Rick, you got your hand up.
Yeah, the other question that was coming up, and it was mentioned earlier, that is there any consideration being given to when somebody's putting in for an exemption, or someone says, hey, yes, you know what, you can buy this vehicle, but it becomes now a class 7 or 8 vehicle as opposed to a class 6 related to CDL and potentially collective bargaining agreements with drivers and such, and whether they are CDL or non-CDL drivers and so on. Is that at all part of the regulation, and is that considered a factor in any exemption?
Yes, though it's not quite on the topic of the survey, I will just highlight that the ZEV purchase exemption does clearly state that if we identify a ZEV that's available in the same or next higher weight class, that we would require the fleet to go and purchase that ZEV. And it doesn't have anything about crossing the CDL requirement lines. So if it means moving from a class 6 to a class 7, the regulation would require us to deny that request if it's a class 7 was available as a ZEV in the same configuration. I think we only have time for one more here. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. Just on this list, so like if I don't have a relationship with an upfitter or manufacturer, and just not sure about their work, no experience with it, but they have a ZEV available, do I have to go purchase that ZEV?
So again, not on the topic of the survey, but generally, yes. And we've covered this, I think, in the final statement of reasons in the regulation, that manufacturer choice is not a consideration that we're going to be looking at for ZEV purchase exemptions.
And Mike, so I'll kind of say, it's like, yeah, if that's the only one left, what Chris said is right. But again, with the rule, you might find it's like, okay, I'm going to go with a different manufacturer because if one's making it, odds are another one is. And if not, you can go with the other vehicle category, depending on the compliance option you're potentially using.
And, you know, in terms of like service network, all that other stuff really doesn't come into play. It's purely whether the manufacturer has a product available.
Yeah, but yeah, the regulation is looking at it at that simply. We do expect that businesses are going to be making all those decisions as to well, if they have preferences for manufacturers, or they obviously know their operation best and where they could probably place ZEVs where they would fit perfectly and where they would be a challenge and so on. And they're going to make those decisions in terms of how they plan. And that's what we try to do in providing the flexibility in the rule. And again, the exemptions become a last resort, or basically the cover those scenarios where it's like, okay, I've done everything I can and I'm out of options. That's what the exemptions or provisions are there to address, that things that fleets don't have control over. But if they exist and they are commercially available, then they would still be required to comply with what's available.
One follow-up just to kind of tie this back to the end discussion with the ZEV purchase exemption checklist. One of the last items for the checklist is letters from OEMs for fleets that have filed a exemption. Is this something that could be provided by CARB? Is CARB expecting to share these surveys as they're come in and reported? Is that something? It seems like one is asking for information documentation from a fleet that a vehicle is not available from at least 2 OEMs, but then if that fleet is then being contradicted by whatever had been identified in a survey, just unbeknownst to the fleet's information, right? They're just talking to the wrong upfitter. They're talking to they're talking to getting a direct letter from an OEM, which some OEMs may be apprehensive about sending something that's not or as stating in an email that something isn't available. Is this something that's going to be shared, I guess, is what I'm alluding to.
I think our initial thoughts for this, again, were more of an internal tool to build out our contact lists. I don't think that we were planning on sharing the results of the survey, but I suppose that could change depending on what the use case might be. So
I mean,
Tony,
I'm thinking we might discuss that if we do the survey, how it's going, I suppose, but I'm not sure with the purpose of providing additional information other than when we need it, we have the right kind of contacts and we can narrow the notification of, hey, here's a new request that came in. Do you guys make these to focus on the right companies?
I think what I'm hearing Brad say is basically turning this into a resource for fleets to be able to use to be able to start securing those manufacturer letters in the need of a ZEV purchase exemption. Is that correct, Brad?
Yeah, because we wouldn't be able to submit an exemption request without those in hand, right? And so.
Okay, but like, I guess in my head, I'm thinking, okay, the manufacturers, there's a pretty small universe of those, but in terms of upfitters and which body configurations they deal with and so on, there's a pretty large universe, and that's kind of the gap we're trying to fill, not so much the manufacturer part. But okay, but I guess we can take that comment in.
And Tony, I was just going to weigh in that if that information on the survey is going to be public at some point, it should probably be disclosed up front that this information on the survey potentially could be public, because folks may or may not want others to know what they build, what their capabilities are. There could be some competitive issues there.
Yeah, if anybody has comments on what would be sensitive too, because I mean, seemed like the questions we were asking were pretty generic, and if I'm an upfitter that does digger derricks and bucket trucks and so on, you would think that that would be right on the webpage too. It wouldn't be concerning information. But okay, I guess we'll think. I guess maybe we need to talk to some of them initially just to get their direct feedback on the questions we might ask and whether they think others in their same business would have sensitivities to answering some of the questions.
And Mr. Lewis had a comment in the chat regarding if the equipment will have been required or at least reportable on the survey, that the vehicle has actually been produced and not is just on a paper offering of a brochure, but the vehicle hasn't actually been built in reality.
I suppose we would look into that, but I mean, per the regulation, if a manufacturer outfitter is willing to sell the vehicle and it's not an experimental demo or test vehicle, then we would require a fleet to purchase it. So I think that
yeah, and keep in mind, I mean, because right now it sounds like you guys are trying to talk about ZEVs, but right now it's like, give me information as to who does bucket trucks, period. And then they might not do ZEVs today, and they might do ZEVs in a year. I mean, so it's more of a contact list than trying to populate every possible question and every possible upfitter that exists in the country. So that's why I'm not we're not trying to create an upfitter list and then a directory or dictionary for other purposes. It's more of, hey, if we have a question, if I can get somebody on the phone that knows the vehicle category or what they do with their own business, then I'm gonna get the best information rather than relying on something generic.
Okay,
Thanks
so
for
we
the
are,
clarification.
yeah, we are
And-
getting over
and
time on this one.
We're over time. We'll move on. I'll have one last statement is saying also if you can include associations that those body upfitters are associated with and do regular business with, that'll help you guys out on your outreach. All right.
All right. So it's still me. I'm going to share my screen again. 1 second while I find it. All right. All right. So this is a draft of the zero emission vehicle purchase exemption request that we have prepared. It's also on Power BI. So when we at CARB receive ZEV purchase exemption requests, the regulation states that if we have trouble finding the needed replacement vehicle as a ZEV, then we post online in a public solicitation. This tool is an example of the visualization that we may use as a public solicitation of ZEVs in accordance with the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. So on the ACF website, CARB staff will post a list of vehicles by class and configurations that fleets are looking to purchase as ZEV. Instructions will include something along the lines of respond only if you can offer a new ZEV for sale or upfit an available new ZEV chassis that meets the following parameters in the visual. So navigating the visual, there's a data table here at the bottom. It's got 10 columns. One of them is ID. The second one is response due. Third one is weight class. Fourth one is body configuration. Fifth one is all-wheel drive. Sixth one is cab over. Seventh one is crew cab. Eighth one is body make. Ninth one is body model. And 10th one is list of necessary frame attachments. So the ID is used by manufacturers to identify the vehicle that they can make as a ZEV that is suitable replacement for the fleet's existing ICE vehicle. So if manufacturer identified a vehicle in the correct class and configuration, they could just send us an email with that ID instead of having to be like, I saw your vehicle with this configuration and that, and we can just correlate the ID to the vehicle ourselves and be like, oh, this manufacturer makes it, or this upfitter can upfit that vehicle. And then response due is if a manufacturer wants CARB to pass along their information to a fleet about being able to make a ZEV that replaces their current ICE vehicle. CARB will need email confirmation by that date. Weight class is what the current fleet's current ICE vehicle is. If a manufacturer can offer a ZEV in the same or one class higher, except for class 8, then a ZEV is considered available to purchase per the regulations. And then body configuration is what type of ICE trucks needs to be replaced with a ZEV. So column headings of all-wheel drive, cab over, and crew cab are yes or no options. If these column headings are marked yes, then the ZEV should also match the yes on the column headings. Manufacturers that offer a ZEV that contains more features than the replacement ICE may still submit information stating that they have a ZEV available. The key portion of those 3 column headings is that for anything listed as a yes for the ICE must also be a yes for the ZEV. Body make and body model columns are there to help manufacturers decide if a ZEV they can offer can function as the same as an ICE vehicle being replaced. These do not need to be exact matches and are listed as an idea of what functions the ZEV would need to have. The list of necessary frame attachments column heading is used to describe the needed frame attachments on which an equivalent body that can perform the same primary intended function can be installed. And then there are 3 filters here at the top. They are weight class, body configuration, and response due. Because there are only 3 example vehicles on this visual right now, it's not really helpful, but once the ZEV purchase exemption requests start coming in and this table becomes more populated and we have more vehicles, we expect that the filters provided will help manufacturers in quickly sorting to the items relevant to them. Manufacturers that only make certain classes of vehicles can sort by classes of vehicles that they make and see where there are demands for ZEV in the market. So for example, if you make class 5 vehicles, you could click on class 5 and only the class 5 vehicle would show up. And that would help you basically narrow down like what fleets are asking for. Body configuration is the next filter. So this filter will be helpful for upfitters to see what body configurations fleets want upfitted on vehicles. And then response due is a descending filter that allows manufacturers to sort by new to old ZEV requests. So basically, we have like the most recent ZEV dates here, so you can know like, hey, I'm kind of like looking from like the last 2 weeks. You can just pick that one or like whichever date you're looking from and go from there. So this visual is a work in progress, and we expect once it goes live to add vehicles to it as we get more ZEV purchase exemption requests. For vehicles that we know exist as ZEV, we will not put on this list. And then we now open it for discussion among the group. Go ahead, John.
So this, just so I got this right, so this would be up on the website if I'm somebody that makes a class 5 bucket truck with outriggers. I would send a note or somehow respond to this and say, yes, I make a class 5 bucket truck with outriggers. And then CARB would therefore tell who's ever asking for the exemption, go talk to me, or there's an available option for you.
Yeah,
right?
that's effectively what the purpose of this would be.
John, and
so-
you're saying a ZEV version, right? As opposed to just an ICE version, right?
Right, yeah, I sell a
Yeah,
class
I
5
saw-
ZEV bucket truck with outriggers, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, sorry. And the question Rick had about it does the job, it has can lift so much weight, it's got certain extensions, all that sort of stuff. How does that play into this?
So for this, the body, make, and model will help the manufacturer kind of identify. So we effectively are going to leave it up to the manufacturer to determine whether or not they believe that their offering can meet the same primary intended function as the identified make and model. So for example, if we're talking a bucket truck and you had an Alltech bucket on the back with a specific body model like AT50, then the manufacturer could look into whether or not, or the upfitter could look into whether or not their offering would perform the same primary intended function as Alltech's AT50 body model. Theoretically, that would be, a 50-foot reach with whatever specifications that bucket body would have. Now, again, this is within the parameters of the regulation. So I know you mentioned lift weight, so things like payload, towing capacity, we can't consider. But if it's, a crane, for example, and there's a crane out there that could only lift 100 pounds, but you're replacing a crane that needs to be able to lift 10,000 pounds. Theoretically, the body, make, and model would help inform whoever's reading this list to be able to help make that determination as to whether or not they could serve that need.
Okay. And if 6 people say they can make a ZEV class 5 bucket truck, will the fleet who asked for this exemption get the names of all 6 of those upfitters?
I would think so. I don't think we have that fully ironed out, but I think that is the intent.
We have to identify at least one by rule. But yeah, if there were, that's part of the purpose of this. If there are 5 or 6, then by all means, I think it would be in their interest to share that information if we have it. But we wouldn't say there's only 5. It's like we know of 5, for instance,
Right, okay.
if we got those responses.
Okay.
Yeah, and then just practically speaking, we know that everybody won't necessarily respond at the same time and that kind of thing. So somebody responds, and then a couple weeks later, it's like, all right, or a week later, we send out the notification to the truck owner, and then we get more people responding that they will also sell it. I guess we can convey that information over if we learn about it. And I think this is a way we're approaching it to meet the regulatory requirements, but at the end of the day, our objective is to get the ZEVs deployed as effectively as possible. And if there's additional information that we can provide people and already have, it's in our interest to do so, to help people along. Because we are looking to assist in compliance, including if you're not aware of other upfitters, dealers, and we have a resource, of course, we would want to share that.
All right, and before I hop off, because we only have a half hour left, I don't know if we'll get back on. I was at the Seaside one-stop truck event a couple weeks ago, and CARB staff mentioned to the people in the room that there were 2 exemptions that were granted, and I'm trying to confirm whether that's true or not, and if so, will they be posted?
John, I'll say maybe after the next overview, we can revisit that question if it hasn't been answered. Is
Okay.
Tiffany next?
Yeah, we can put Tiffany up next if we don't have any more questions on
Oh, wait,
this
do we have 2
particular
more
item.
topics? Yeah, I mean, I think we need to start moving on because we won't have any time for discussion of next
Yeah.
meeting and stuff like that.
I think all that's left is the open discussion and the tee up topics for the next meeting, and then Tiffany's portion. So
Oh, okay, maybe we should do it in reverse order.
yeah, I
I
think
mean,
that would be
go to
fine.
overview and then we can close with a discussion of both last 2 those 2 topics.
Yeah, so I
Tiffany, are
guess
you ready?
before we jump, are there any
Oh,
more
okay.
questions or comments on this particular tool?
Sounds like
Hearing
we're good.
any, I think we can move on.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Canales. I'm one of the Air Resources supervisors working alongside Chris and Jerry on ACF implementation, and I have some quick stats for the ACF exemption and extension applications that CARB has received up to date. So as of today, 34 total applications have been received for ACF exemptions and extensions. 68% of these applications have been for ZEV purchase exemption. 15% have been for non-repairable vehicles, and the remaining 6 applications received were spread across intermittent snow removal vehicles, vehicle delivery delay extension, daily uses exemption, and the infrastructure delay extension site electrification portion. Of these 34 applications, 3 applications have been approved as of today. We have 1 ZEV purchase exemption approval from a high priority fleet following the model year schedule. We have 1 intermittent snow removal vehicle approval, also from a high priority fleet following the model year schedule. And we have 1 non-repairable vehicle approval for a drayage day cap. So primary reasons for denials that we have seen so far, in the best case, an exemption simply wasn't needed due to the flexibility in the regulation based on the selected compliance option or due to early purchase credits. A lot of applications come with missing or ineligible documentation, which results in an incomplete application. Sometimes the applications involve vehicles that are actually not subject to ACF. And occasionally we also have identified a zero emission vehicle option available for sale in California and issued a denial. And those are the stats that I have, if anyone has any questions.
And so, Tony, I guess I don't know if you want to cover whether or not we're going to be posting this online or if we're able to commit to anything like that.
I think, yeah, in the past, we've just talked about we would discuss it here. And then I'm not sure that we're necessarily posting them per se or doing periodic reports or something like that. So did we cover John's question? Because since that was very related here.
So I'll just jump back on. So there was a non-repairable vehicle, a snowplow exemption, and a model year high priority ZEV purchase exemption. Tiffany, did I get that right?
Yes, correct.
So I think my question goes to the ZEV purchase exemption. You know, what did they do right? Is it an example that others could use such that they're not reinventing the wheel? Or even the stuff that was denied? I know you just gave the stats, but if there's something specific that somebody did wrong, that could be helpful so the next person doesn't make the same mistake. So you guys don't get the same thing over and over. People keep trying. I think that's kind of where I'm headed, Tony, is that if there's like an exemption page that said, here's the successes and here's common errors, or here's why we denied.
Yeah. Well, I would say that was one of the things the checklist was to help, because a lot of times it's just it's sometimes it's something very simple. It's like,
Sure.
okay, you gave us a letter from one manufacturer and you didn't actually have one from the other, so we need two. And so it's like, okay, go back and get that information. In many cases, it's been the one that's actually more, I don't know, I find more interesting is that in many cases, the fleets are applying for an exemption. Again, like when you're doing 50% purchases, it's like, we've already bought whatever, 10 ZEVs, but we're going to buy these 3 digger derricks, and so we need an exemption. It's like, you probably won't need an exemption for several years. You can buy them without asking for the exemption at all, kind of thing, comes up a lot. So to me, that's the area that seems to be the one that it seems like it's common enough. And so it's like, well, okay, we need to make sure we get more outreach to those particular fleets and make sure they're understanding how the rule works, and that you don't need an exemption in these examples, for instance.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean,
And I think as Lacey's comment earlier about just maybe making that more clear, because we have that one liner, but maybe that's not clear enough, and figuring out how to make that more obvious to people.
yeah, in terms of also the reasons for incomplete or ineligible applications, I mean, it's everything that's laid out in the checklist. Either the fleet was ineligible because their vehicles aren't old enough to apply for an exemption for the vehicle they're replacing. The fleet is asking to get an exemption for vehicles they're purchasing new, which are, again, not replacements per the regulation, which is, again, outlined in the checklist. And in terms of applications being incomplete, it's usually just missing some of the documentation, like they either forgot to submit their one or more manufacturer letters. The letters submitted were from dealerships and not from manufacturers. They forgot to include the body, make, and model of the vehicle that they're replacing, just kind of the basics that are all outlined in the checklist. There's nothing really outside of the box or unusual with these.
Sure.
It's just, if you didn't meet what's in the checklist, then those are the primary reasons for any of the denials for ineligible or incomplete applications we've given. I think it's only been one scenario where we've identified a ZEV that was available, and then for the approval, they checked all the boxes, they were eligible, and they submitted all the documentation, and it was for, I believe it was a off-road 4x4 for an all-wheel drive yard tractor in Class 8. That we could not identify any ZEV manufacturer for.
So my question really relates to what is CARB giving this person who got the exemption? Is it an email that says you're exempt? Is it a sort of like a EO that says you can buy this configuration for the next so many months? Do you have to? Is it something that it's an ID that I can put into truckers? What am I getting back that I know I got what I needed?
So in that situation, we're submitting an email back to the fleet with a signed approval letter signed by our executive officer's delegate, which highlights basically what the application was for, what they requested, and what we're approving, and also the next steps. So basically what it gets them, it allows them to go out and purchase a combustion version of that vehicle within 180 calendar days per the regulation language. They have to place that order. Once they get it, there's follow-up information about the next steps they need to take, which is when they receive it in the California fleet, report it within 30 days, submit the rest of the required information and photographs of the vehicle that they purchased, and then we will close the loop in our trucker system to update it and reflect that they have an exemption for that particular vehicle.
And the close the loop, that's something CARB does. That's not something the regulated entity would be able to check and say this is the exempt vehicle being registered into truckers.
They would have to submit to, as part of a approved exemption, the regulation requires that when that vehicle is received by the fleet, they have to report it and submit additional documentation to the trucker's email. Once we get that information, then we will go into the trucker system, update that vehicle that was added with a designation to show that it had received that exemption.
Just make sure we're talking the same language. Yeah, in essence, they're just notifying us, look, here's the vehicle I bought under the exemption. There's details that go with it, but then it's like, okay, we'll update it to reflect the exemption and, because it could be easily a year before they get their
Sure.
replacement vehicle too.
Okay.
So,
And so
Thank
there
you,
will
that's
be
helpful.
something they can see in truckers that'll reflect that. Is that correct, Jerry?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
if there aren't questions, we're down to 15 minutes.
Yeah, so we can probably pivot
Might-
to next topics. So I'll ask Dorothy to pop on.
Yeah, so for our next meeting, one topic that we've already heard brought up today that we were already proposing to talk about was the streamlines of purchase exemption list. We'd like to know if that's a topic that you're interested in. Are there other topics you want to cover in our next meeting? Do you have specific questions about the streamline list you'd like us to address in that meeting? So if anyone has any ideas, we can talk about them now for a few minutes. We don't have a lot of time left. And if you have ideas after the meeting concludes, you can send those to the Zev Fleet email and put something like rule provisions trig in the subject line so they get sorted into the right basket.
So I'll just go ahead and throw in, it's like if there are other topics as well, so feel free to chime in on, is there something else that we want to cover at the next meeting? And then, any comments about questions Dorothy had.
Sorry, and one other item I wanted to add is that we did also post the infrastructure delay extension checklist on our FAQs page. So that one is currently live, and that could be a potential topic for next meeting if anybody wants to raise that.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you. Sure, purchase exemption list is of interest. The other one I'm wondering about, Tony, is that our provision about CalCert engines and reporting them in truckers, how are they deemed compliant? The three variations, the CARB cert, EPA cert, and the one that falls in the middle of those two, and how they're put into truckers in order to and viewed in compliance. I don't know if that's on anybody else's list, but that's on mine. Getting questions.
Thanks, Mike. Sarah?
Sorry, keep having a delay. Okay. Regarding next meeting, I'm not sure the timing of it, but wondering if possibly it would be worth talking about the impacts of the passing of AB 1594 and some of the recent Section 100 changes, as well as maybe some other, I guess, draft revisions that are being considered impact what we've been talking about today and in previous meetings. I know it will already impact the Section 100 changes will already impact that spreadsheet for public agency utilities. So that's something that I thought may be worth 15 minutes in the next meeting.
Okay, well, okay, so on that topic, I hear you, because you actually brought up something I wasn't thinking about, but we are doing workshops and regulatory amendments still to implement the 1594, and so we are planning a workshop very soon. So I anticipate we'll be covering a lot of some of that information there. So I wouldn't want this venue to become a reg discussion workshop.
No, yeah.
But as you touched on, there are some changes and then how we reflect those changes and inform people about it is a definitely relevant topic here. So okay, so we'll take that back on our list of trying to figure out, because I'm assuming the workshops and so on are probably going to occur before the next meeting.
Yeah, September 24th.
Yeah, so if we cover it there, then that might be the better
Yeah,
venue.
the other revisions, maybe Section 100 revisions that impact, say, that spreadsheet that was just presented today. And it could be, again, well, you can decide on that, but I think it might be worth it for the public agencies. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'd love to also just ask the other panelists, as folks are approaching end of year requirements on all of this, is, does this cover what your members, what you personally, kind of any of the specific issues and questions you have as we're coming up to the end of year reporting, the first high priority deadlines for 10%? Is there anything that would be helpful that you think would be of benefit across the industry that could be covered in one of these workshops as well? Knowing that the last workshop of the year this would be the last workshop of the year. Fantastic to know that everybody is going to be in full compliance and has no questions.
Don't speak too fast. Emily?
Yeah, I mean, on that topic, I certainly have a lot of questions on how, for back to public fleets, those on their purchase requirement, how the compliance reporting is going to work and look like when we are tracking purchase date and not delivery, but what we're reporting in truckers is delivery, not purchase date. And maybe it's not at the end of the year, maybe it's the first quarter next year, but providing more assistance to the various types of entities and what the compliance reporting looks like to make sure there aren't any issues staying, certified and in compliance could be helpful.
That's a good topic.
And then also for the streamline purchase exemption, when we're talking about that, I have questions kind of related to my earlier questions about how that works with proving that you need the exemption when you're talking about 50% and how that's going to factor in. So if that could just be touched on when we talk about it, that'd be great.
All right, thanks everyone. Again, if you come up with other topics that you want to discuss or more specific questions, you can submit them to the Zev Fleet email and put something in the subject like rule provisions training. Thank you.
And so Dorothy, we're looking at the calendars, and so it looks like the next meeting, everyone check your calendars for the week of December 9th. See if that works for everyone's calendar. So panelists, check your calendars, and if you are seeing some issues, then let's filter those emails through Rebecca and Bradley so that we can get those over to us. But it looks like that's the week that we will be shooting for the final rule provisions trig meeting of 2024.
And as everybody's checking their calendars, Jerry, there was one comment from Suzanne regarding the synopsis of the stats, if that might be available or provided, or it's going to be posted online for ACF, if that's a resource that we can be able to use.
Yeah, I'll have to defer to Tony on what, if we're going to be posting those, but I did want to let everyone know that we have had people taking notes of the today's meeting, and we're shooting to get those posted by the end of next week. Again, we'll send out notice to all the panelists once those are posted, and if we do, we can include we'll look into that request, and if we might be able to include that in the notes as well. And if anyone's wondering, you might be noticing that at today's meeting, you didn't see our old friend Craig During here on the screen. And if you were wondering, well, he's out enjoying his retirement now. He is out and about having fun. And you've noticed that Chris Franceschi, another familiar face, has been moderating some of the presenters and presentations, and Chris is actually taking over for Craig as manager of our compliance support section. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. And if anyone thinks of a comment or input or feedback after today's meeting, or if we didn't have enough time to get to it, as we mentioned throughout the meeting, you can send emails to the zevfleet@arb.ca.gov. Panelists, you're always welcome to send those through Rebecca and Bradley. But anyone who's just out there in the world listening in, send us those emails to zevfleet@arb.ca.gov. If you have reporting questions with the truckers reporting system, you can send those to truckers@arb.ca.gov. If you are, if you are having some questions or concerned with your truckers reporting, we also have an online reporting guide as well as reporting videos on YouTube to help out with that process as well. So,
Yeah, well, and then while you're mentioning it, because it did kind of come up a little, there's some discussion about outreach and outreach activities. There is an outreach group, and we're actually out doing live events as well as video and remote participation. But there's an outreach group that's focused on how to get the information out to everybody that needs it too. So encourage those to watch those particular meetings or as well if you're interested in that.
Yeah,
topic.
there's actually a one-stop, what we call our one-stop events in Tulare. When is that one, Chris and Dorothy? Both of you be there, right?
I'll be in Tulare, so that'll be on September 17th. And then I believe we have two more upcoming, one October 27th, and then one potentially towards the end of November.
So there are those resources as well. We probably should include that in the future meetings, just the status of the next ones.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, we thought we were going to run out of time. It looks like we haven't. I don't know if there's any other closing statements anybody wants to make. So Bradley or Rebecca.
I'll add to the sentiment in the chat that hasn't been said out here just yet, but congratulations, Chris, on your promotion, and looking forward to moving this group into the next meeting in December. It looks like that December 9th, week of December 9th looks good. December 10th is more specifically may be beneficial. So hopefully all of the panelists are able to solidify their schedules, provide that information up to us, myself and Rebecca, as quickly as possible so we can solidify that date, get it scheduled, and start planning.
No, and I noticed a comment as well. It's like that it is a board hearing week, so we would not do it on the board hearing days, but we're still looking at that week potentially. So.
And the board hearing day
tends to be Tuesday. It's almost always Thursday, Friday, so I presume it still is, but I haven't checked the calendar.
It is on Thursday, Friday of that week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, everyone. I'll turn it over to Chris to close us out.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for your congratulations. And yeah, I'm very happy that we were able to get through everything. We had a lot of mileage to cover today, so I'm looking forward to the next trig meeting, and we'll see you all then. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.